Hello, my name is Mia Garcia. I'm 28 years old. And if you ask me about my life, I'd say it's like a vibrant salsa dance full of passionate highs, graceful dips, and rhythms that only my heart truly understands. I live in Miami, Florida, a city where the ocean meets dreams and the sun paints everything in golden hues. But it's also where I grew up, where every memory shimmers like sunlight on water. I live alone in a small, cozy apartment in Little Havana, not too far from the beach. Close enough to hear the waves whispering secrets at dawn. That's where I paint, where my colors can flow freely without judgment. At least for now. If your family ever called your dreams impossible, comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you're ready to see how I went from failed artist to shocking them with my $30 million yacht. I'm the youngest child in a traditional Cuban-American family. There are 3 of us siblings: my older brother Diego, who's 6 years older than me, my sister Carmen, for years my senior, and then me. My family isn't wealthy, but we've never lacked the warmth of togetherness either. My father, Roberto Garcia, is a supervisor at a shipping company at the Port of Miami, always busy with cargo schedules and paperwork. He lives with my mother, Isabella, in a comfortable 3-bedroom house in Coral Gables, where we all grew up surrounded by the scent of Café Cubano and the sound of Spanish guitar. My mother is a high school Spanish teacher who's always believed that life should be as structured as her lesson plans. They're practical people, always emphasizing steady jobs and secure futures. Mija, dreams don't put food on the table, Mom would say, her voice carrying the weight of immigrant wisdom. My brother Diego lives in New York City, working as a financial advisor for a prestigious firm on Wall Street. He's successful in the way people admire: expensive suits, corner office, and a salary that makes our parents beam with pride. My sister Carmen is in Orlando, working as a pediatric nurse at a major hospital. She's caring, dedicated, and everything our parents hoped their daughter would become. Both my siblings have stable careers, the kind my parents proudly mention to every neighbor, every church friend, every family gathering. But I'm different. Ever since I was a little girl, I've been passionately in love with art, as if it's the very blood flowing through my veins. Not casual doodling, but serious painting. Visions that creep into my mind at 3 a.m. Colors that tell stories of joy, sorrow, or dreams I've never lived. I vividly remember the first time I picked up my grandmother's old paintbrush when I was 7. It was a humid summer afternoon in Miami, with golden sunlight streaming through my abuela's kitchen window. My grandmother, Elena Garcia, was the one who ignited that spark in me. She used to be a painter in Havana before the revolution, creating beautiful landscapes of Cuba that she had to leave behind when the family fled to Miami in 1962. She wasn't a famous artist, just a passionate woman who loved art so much she could paint all night without tiring. Her stories about painting the Malecon at sunset, where Caribbean breeze mixed with the scent of jasmine, always captivated me. "Art isn't a job, Mia," she'd say, using my name like a gentle caress. "It's the soul speaking. If you let it guide you, you'll soar higher than the palm trees." My grandmother lives in a small house and homestead, not far from my parents' place. It's a peaceful spot with a big garden full of mango trees and blooming bougainvillea. My grandfather, Carlos, passed away when I was 15, but he was always her biggest supporter. They were the perfect pair. When my grandmother painted, my grandfather would sit and watch with admiration. She's one of the few who supported my pursuit of art, though she had to do it quietly to avoid family conflict. "Follow what your heart tells you, mi nieta," she'd often whisper, stroking my hair. "Your abuelo and I, we lost our chance to pursue art when we came here. But you're American. You have opportunities we never had." They were my only light during the darkest days. As for the rest of my family, well, they see me as an impractical dreamer, a stain on their perfect success story. Even as a child, I felt that judgment. Diego was always praised for his math skills and business sense. Carmen got recognition for her compassion and academic achievements. And me? Whenever I spent hours at my easel in the garage, my father would shake his head and say, "Mia, you should focus on your studies. Art is just a hobby, not a career." My mother was even harsher. She'd compare me to my siblings constantly. Look at Diego. He's going to be rich. Carmen saves lives. And you? Sitting there with those paints all day. How will you support yourself? How will you support a family? Those words cut like broken glass, but I didn't argue back. I just stayed silent, swallowing my tears like bitter medicine. Let me tell you about a typical evening at our house to give you a clearer picture of that alienation. I was about 19, and it was a warm family dinner with the Miami heat making everything sticky outside. We sat around the table eating Mom's arroz con pollo and maduros. Diego had just come home from his internship at a bank in downtown Miami, bragging about landing a full-time offer. My father raised his beer, beaming with pride. Ese es mi hijo. That's a real future. Carmen talked about getting accepted into nursing school. Mom's eyes lit up. My daughter, the nurse. Everyone will respect you. Then it was my turn. Excitedly, I shared that I'd just finished a painting series inspired by Abuela's stories of old Havana. I even showed them photos on my phone, my voice trembling with nervousness and hope. But the reaction, my father frowned deeply. Mía, otra vez con eso. Art isn't a career. I don't want my daughter starving like some bohemian. Mom sighed heavily. Mija, I'm worried about you. Your brother and sister have clear paths, but you keep dreaming. Please think about your future. What about teaching? At least that's stable. Diego chuckled, not even looking up from his phone. I'd suggest getting a business degree, something practical. Maybe you could do graphic design for companies or something. Carmen stayed quiet, but I could see the pity in her eyes, the same look people give stray cats. I sat there feeling like an outsider in my own family. My heart pounded with anger and sadness, but I just finished my meal in silence and asked to be excused. Moments like that kept repeating, and I grew more withdrawn. I felt out of place, like a bright tropical bird trapped in a cage of expectations. I don't resent my brother or sister. I love them truly. But that constant criticism made me wonder if I was truly their family or just some mistake that wandered into their perfect lives. Only my grandmother understood. After dinners like that, I'd drive to her house in Homestead, even in the suffocating Miami heat. Abuela would open the door, give me a tight hug, and say, "Ven acá, mi amor. I've got the paints ready." We'd sit in her small studio room with the fan whirring overhead. She'd show me techniques she remembered from Havana. I'd paint while she told stories. And our creativity would blend like a warm embrace on a cold day. "You have talent, Mia," Abuela would say, her eyes sparkling with the wisdom of years. "Don't let anyone dim your light. I missed my chance because we had to survive. But you're different. You're stronger than I was. You have freedom I never had." Those words were like medicine for my wounded soul, helping me through the loneliness. Over time, that alienation turned into determination. I started spending more time with Abuela, learning from her. She told me about her years in Havana, painting the ocean and colonial buildings, the way light danced on cobblestone streets. "Art is an adventure, Mia," she said. "It can take you places you never imagined. In Cuba, I painted revolution in the air. Here, you can paint revolution in your heart." I took mental notes on everything. I started creating my first serious paintings, vibrant pieces about Miami's sunrise, about immigration, about dreams deferred but not destroyed. Abuela helped me set up a small studio in her garage, and she always prayed for my success. When I was 20, everything changed. It was the spring after my sophomore year of college. I was studying communications to appease my parents while secretly taking as many art classes as possible. I sat in my dorm room staring at a stack of career fair flyers. My parents had circled teaching positions, administrative jobs, safe careers as they called them. My heart pounded at the thought of sitting in an office cubicle all day while my mind was filled with colors and compositions. I clearly remember that night, staying up late with my sketchbook beside my bed. I drew a sad portrait of a girl caught between dreams and reality, her face half in shadow, half in light. The next morning, I made my decision. I would change my major to fine arts, even if it meant facing a hurricane from my family. I told my parents on a Sunday afternoon when the whole family was gathered around the table with Café Cubano and Tres Leches cake. Diego was visiting from New York, and Carmen was there with her nursing textbooks spread around. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. Mom, Dad, I want to change my major to fine arts. I want to become a professional artist. Silence engulfed the room, broken only by the sound of the air conditioner humming. Then my father exploded like a firecracker. ¿Qué? Are you crazy, Mia? I've told you 1,000 times, art isn't a career. What are you going to live on? Selling paintings on the street. His face turned red, and he slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle like castanets. Mom shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. Mia Corazon, art is just a pastime. It doesn't provide a living. Look at your brother and sister. They have clear futures. You're breaking our hearts with this nonsense. Diego chimed in, his tone condescending as always. Little sister, I'm telling you this for your own good. I've seen people chase art and fail miserably. You should stick with communications, maybe get into marketing. It's safer. Carmen finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. Mia, I think you should reconsider. Mom and Dad are right. You need stability. I sat there feeling like my heart was being squeezed in a vice. Their criticisms cut like machetes, slicing into my dreams. I tried to explain. I'm passionate about this. Abuela said art is the soul speaking. I don't want to live without pursuing it. But they didn't listen. My father stood up, pointing his finger at me. Your grandmother was just a dreamer who had to flee her country. You want to follow that path? I won't allow it. If you change your major, don't expect our support. Mom started crying. Diego shook his head in disappointment. Carmen looked down at her textbooks as if they held all the answers to life's problems. I ran outside, tears streaming down my face like a sudden Miami rainstorm, and drove straight to Abuela's house. She opened the door, saw my tear-streaked face, and hugged me tightly. ¿Qué pasó, mi nieta? I told her everything, my voice breaking like waves against rocks. She listened, then smiled with the serenity of someone who had faced much greater storms. Mia, you made the right choice. Art isn't an easy path, especially for us Latinos, but if you stay determined, I believe you'll succeed. I support you completely. She brought me café con leche and stroked my hair like when I was little. I'm praying for you every day. Don't be afraid, mi amor. You have something special. They were my only anchor, like a lighthouse in a storm. That evening, we sat in her studio. She showed me paintings she'd hidden away, beautiful landscapes of Havana she'd painted from memory, colorful and full of longing. We painted together, an abstract piece about family and dreams, our brushstrokes blending in perfect harmony. I changed my major the next week, despite my parents cutting off financial support. I worked 3 part-time jobs, waitressing at a Cuban restaurant, cleaning houses, and giving art lessons to kids. My hands were always tired, my back ached, and I smelled like Café Cubano and cleaning products, but at night, I painted with the fury of someone chasing a dream. The family conflict didn't stop. They called constantly, their criticism relentless. Mom called every few days. Mija, how are you surviving? Are you eating enough? Why don't you come back and study something practical? Art is just a game for rich people. Her voice was full of worry, but laced with disappointment that cut deeper than anger. Dad was harsher. You think you're special? Look at Diego. He just got promoted. Carmen's helping sick children. And you? A waitress who paints. I'm embarrassed to tell people what my daughter does. Diego texted occasionally, I'm sending you some money, but you should really rethink this. Don't make Mom and Dad suffer like this. Carmen was gentler, but when she called, the comparisons were always there. I just saved a child's life today. How was your day? Still painting? Each conversation felt like a battle, leaving me drained, my heart racing every time the phone rang. I tried to stay strong, but at night, lying in my tiny apartment, I questioned everything. Had I made the wrong choice? Was art really just a luxury for people who didn't have to worry about survival? The first 3 years after college were absolute hell. I faced countless struggles, late rent payments, eating rice and beans for weeks, creating paintings no one wanted to buy. I applied to dozens of galleries, only to be rejected with form letters. Once I submitted a piece to a local Miami art competition, and it didn't even make it past the first round. I cried alone in my apartment that night, staring at canvases stacked against the wall like discarded dreams. Why did I choose this impossible path? I whispered to my reflection in the darkened window. Why couldn't I just be normal like everyone else? Get a degree, find a job, make my parents proud. That self-doubt was like a shadow that followed me everywhere, making my hands shake when I held a paintbrush, making colors look muddy and lifeless. Whenever I was on the verge of giving up, Abuela lifted me up. Those afternoons in her studio were sacred moments. She'd text me encouragements. Don't let them discourage you. They love you, but they're scared. Fear makes people cruel. You have to prove them wrong with your success, not your words. She sent me food, slipped me money when I wasn't looking, and most importantly, she never stopped believing in me. Slowly, very slowly, I started making small progress. I sold a few paintings to tourists in South Beach, earned a little extra money teaching art at a community center. But the tension with my family remained as tight as a guitar string about to snap. 4 years of struggling as an artist passed in a blur of exhaustion and hope. Each day was a battle, exhausting work, lonely painting sessions, and enduring family criticism. But gradually I started getting used to that rhythm, that dance between survival and passion. Then one day, an event happened that shook my world in a way I could never have anticipated. It was a scorching summer morning, with Miami heat making the air shimmer like a mirage. I was setting up my easel at a local art fair in Wynwood, sweat beading on my forehead despite the early hour, when my phone buzzed with an urgent ringtone. It was Carmen, her voice trembling with panic. "Mia, come to the hospital right now. Abuela, she collapsed this morning. They think it's her heart." My world stopped spinning. I abandoned my paintings and ran to my car, not caring about the art fair or the money I'd lose. On the drive to Jackson Memorial Hospital, I prayed in Spanish and English, tears blurring my vision. "Please, Abuela, you have to be okay. I need you. You're all I have." When I arrived, my family was already there in the sterile waiting room. Dad paced back and forth, his face grave. Mom sat clutching a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. Diego had flown down from New York and sat with his head in his hands. Carmen, still in her nurse uniform from her shift, was talking quietly with the doctors. Dr. Martinez emerged from the ICU, his expression somber. "I'm sorry. We did everything we could, but the damage was too extensive. She didn't suffer." I stood there, my legs unable to support me, unable to believe what I was hearing. Abuela, my teacher, my friend, my inspiration, was gone forever. The woman who had taught me that art was the soul speaking had gone silent. The funeral took place 3 days later at St. Dominic Catholic Church in Little Havana. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of white roses. My parents were stoic throughout the ceremony, their faces masks of controlled grief. Diego gave a polite eulogy about family and tradition. Carmen spoke about Abuela's kindness. But when my turn came, I couldn't speak. I just stood at the podium, looking at her casket covered in tropical flowers, and wept. Only I truly understood what we had lost, not just a grandmother, but an artist, a dreamer, a woman who had carried the colors of Cuba in her heart for 60 years. After the funeral, Mom pulled me aside in the church parking lot, her voice heavy with sorrow and something else, opportunity. "Mia, do you see now? Your grandmother spent her life dreaming about art, but what did it get her? She died with nothing but old paintings nobody wanted. You should really rethink your path, Mija. It's not too late to go back to school, get a real career." Her words were like salt in a fresh wound, but I didn't respond. I just wanted to run away to somewhere I could grieve alone. In the days that followed, I was like a ghost haunting my own life. I didn't go to work, didn't paint, just sat in my apartment staring at Abuela's easel that she'd given me, gathering dust in the corner. Every night I dreamed of her, seeing her paint-stained hands, hearing her gentle voice, "Keep going, Mia." But I couldn't. I felt empty, as if all the colors had drained from the world. One evening I forced myself to go through her things that the family was preparing to donate. In a dusty box in her closet, I found something that changed everything: dozens of paintings she'd never shown anyone. Landscapes of Cuba so beautiful they took my breath away. Portraits of family members painted with such love that I could feel it radiating from the canvas. And at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a painting of me as a little girl, standing in a field of sunflowers, my face bright with joy and possibility. On the back, in her careful handwriting, "Para mi nieta, who will paint the world in colors I never imagined. Con todo mi amor, abuela Elena." I held that painting and cried until I had no tears left. Then something shifted inside me, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I set up my easel and began to paint with a fury I'd never felt before. I painted Abuela's memories, the Havana she described, the journey to America, the dreams deferred but not destroyed. I painted for hours, days, losing track of time, pouring all my grief and love onto canvas. I created a series called Letters to Havana, 12 paintings that told the story of Cuban exile, of dreams carried across an ocean, of art as resistance and remembrance. When I was done, I knew I had created something special, something that carried Abuela's spirit and my own heart. I had no expectations when I submitted the series to a gallery in South Beach. I just wanted to honor Abuela, to show the world the story she'd carried in her heart. But then something miraculous happened. A week later, I got a call from Sofia Restrepo, the gallery director. Her voice was electric with excitement. "Mia Garcia? I saw your Letters to Havana series. It's extraordinary. I want to feature it in our next exhibition. When can we meet?" I stared at my phone, hardly believing what I was hearing. "Really? You want to show my work?" "I want to do more than show it. I think this could launch your career. There's something here that speaks to the Cuban-American experience in a way I've never seen before." That exhibition opened 6 months later to critical acclaim. Art critics from Miami, New York, and even Havana praised the work. 3 paintings sold on opening night for more money than I'd made in 2 years of part-time jobs. Collectors started asking about commissioning pieces. A documentary filmmaker wanted to feature my story. But I still didn't tell my family. I knew they wouldn't understand, or worse, they'd find some way to diminish it. "It's just beginner's luck," I could hear Dad saying. "Real artists are famous. You just got lucky once." I only shared the news with one person. I stood in front of Abuela's grave at Woodlawn Cemetery, holding a photo of the exhibition opening, and whispered, "We did it, Abuela. Your stories are finally being heard." The next 5 years were a whirlwind journey, like a salsa song that starts slow and builds to an irresistible crescendo. After Letters to Havana, the art world embraced me in ways I'd never imagined possible. The exhibition had been featured in Art in America magazine, and suddenly everyone wanted to see what the young Cuban-American artist would create next. I threw myself into my work with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. My apartment in Little Havana became a proper studio, every wall covered with canvases in various stages of completion. I painted the immigrant experience, the tension between tradition and assimilation, the beauty and pain of living between two worlds. My series, Café Cubano Dreams, explored the lives of Miami's working-class Latino community. Ocean Crossing depicted the journey from Cuba to Florida, both literal and metaphorical. Each series was more successful than the last. Galleries in New York began representing my work. Collectors from Los Angeles and Chicago started bidding on pieces. I was invited to art fairs in Basel and Venice. A major museum in Washington, D.C. acquired one of my paintings for their permanent collection. The money started flowing in ways I'd never imagined. A single painting that once took me weeks to complete and might sell for $500 now commanded $50,000 or more. My series, Revolution's Daughters, inspired by Abuela's stories of women in 1950s Havana, broke auction records for emerging Latino artists. But success didn't change who I was at heart. I still lived simply, still drove my old Honda Civic, still ate at the same Cuban cafeteria where I'd worked as a waitress. The only difference was that now I could pay my rent on time and buy quality art supplies instead of the cheapest brushes I could find. By the time I turned 28, my net worth had grown to over $30 million through art sales and smart investments in real estate and blue-chip stocks. I owned a beautiful penthouse overlooking Biscayne Bay, a vintage Porsche 911 I'd bought as a tribute to my success, and a yacht I'd named Elena's Dream in honor of Abuela. But I kept it all secret. When I visited my family, which became less and less frequent, they still saw me as the struggling artist daughter who couldn't get her life together. During our rare encounters, the conversations always followed the same painful script. Dad would ask, "Still painting those pictures, Mija? When are you going to get a real job? You're almost 30. Mom would sigh deeply. "I worry about you all alone in that little apartment. Look at Diego, he just bought a house in Manhattan. Carmen has 2 kids and a husband. What do you have?" Diego, now a senior financial advisor, would offer condescending advice. "Mia, I could get you an entry-level position at my firm. You're smart enough to learn finance. It's never too late to start a real career." Carmen, busy with her nursing career and growing family, would add gently but firmly, "We just want you to be stable, Mia. Art is beautiful as a hobby, but you need security." I'd sit there, biting my tongue, watching them eat Mom's ropa vieja while they unknowingly crushed my spirit with their good intentions. They had no idea that my hobby had made me wealthier than all of them combined, that my paintings hung in galleries where they charged $30 just to enter, that art collectors flew from Europe just to see my latest work. But I didn't tell them. Partly because I feared they wouldn't believe me, and partly because their approval had stopped matching somewhere along the way. I'd found validation in my art, in my success, in carrying forward Abuela's legacy. During this time, I poured my wealth into causes that mattered. I established a scholarship fund for young Latino artists, donated anonymously to community art programs, and secretly funded a renovation of the community center where I'd taught art classes during my struggling years. I bought buildings in Little Havana to prevent gentrification from displacing the families who'd been there for generations. But there was one project that consumed my thoughts, one dream that had been growing in my heart since Abuela's death. I wanted to create something that would preserve her memory and the stories of all the Cuban exiles who'd carried their dreams across dangerous waters to a new country. I began quietly planning the most ambitious project of my life. With my millions, I decided to establish a museum and cultural center dedicated to Cuban American art and history. I found the perfect location, a historic Art Deco building in South Beach that had been empty for years, scheduled for demolition. I bought the building through a shell company, then hired the best architects and designers in Miami to transform it into a world-class cultural institution. The Elena Garcia Museum and Cultural Center would feature rotating exhibitions of Cuban and Cuban American artists, educational programs for young people, and a permanent collection that would preserve the artistic heritage that had been scattered by exile and time. The centerpiece would be a recreation of a 1950s Havana artist's studio, complete with Abuela's paintings and personal effects, showing visitors what was lost and what survived the crossing to America. I also commissioned a mural for the museum's entrance, a massive piece depicting the journey from Cuba to Miami, painted by a collective of Cuban-American artists including myself. It would show the pain of leaving, the hope of arriving, and the beauty of building a new life while honoring the old one. The project took 3 years to complete and cost nearly $20 million, but when I saw the finished museum, I knew Abuela would have wept with joy. Her paintings, once hidden in a closet, now hung in climate-controlled galleries with professional lighting and scholarly descriptions. Her story, once known only to me, would now educate thousands of visitors about the artistic legacy of Cuban exile. But I planned to reveal it all at once, in a moment that would shock my family and show them who I'd really become. I decided to wait for our annual family reunion, a tradition my parents had maintained for 23 years, where all the extended family gathered at a rented pavilion in Bayfront Park to celebrate our heritage with music, food, and endless conversations about everyone's achievements. This year's reunion would be different. This year, instead of sitting silently while my cousins bragged about their promotions and my siblings displayed their conventional successes, I would arrive in a way that would change everything. I chartered my yacht, the 85-foot Elena's Dream, to dock at the marina visible from the pavilion. I planned to arrive by helicopter, landing directly at the reunion, then invite my family aboard the yacht for a journey to the museum opening. It would be a day they'd never forget, a moment when the family failure would reveal herself as the family's greatest success. But I was also terrified. What if they still didn't understand? What if they found some way to diminish this achievement too? What if success couldn't bridge the gap that years of criticism had created? The night before the reunion, I stood on the deck of my yacht, looking out at the glittering Miami skyline, holding one of Abuela's paintbrushes that I'd kept as a talisman. "Tomorrow, Abuela," I whispered to the stars. "Tomorrow I'll show them that your granddaughter painted her way to the sky." The morning of the family reunion dawned bright and clear, with that perfect Miami sunshine that makes everything look like it's been painted in golden light. I stood in my penthouse, looking out at Biscayne Bay where Elena's Dream sat anchored like a floating palace, its white hull gleaming against the turquoise water. I dressed deliberately in my oldest clothes, a faded Cuban flag t-shirt that Abuela had given me, worn jeans with paint stains, and beat-up sneakers. I wanted to look exactly like the failed artist they expected to see, at least initially. The transformation would be more dramatic that way. The reunion was being held at Bayfront Park, the same location it had been for over 2 decades. I could picture my family already there, Mom setting up folding tables with plastic tablecloths, Dad grilling pork and chicken while complaining about the heat, Diego networking with successful cousins, Carmen chasing after her 2 kids while discussing medical cases with anyone who'd listen. They'd all be there. Tio Miguel with his construction company, Prima Rosa who'd become a successful lawyer, Cousin Roberto who owned 3 restaurants, Tia Carmen who'd married a doctor. A whole gathering of Cuban-American success stories, living proof that hard work and practical choices led to prosperity. And then there would be me, or who they thought I was. I checked my watch. The reunion started at noon, and I'd planned my arrival for 1 p.m., when everyone would be settled in, probably already discussing their latest achievements, their new cars, their children's accomplishments. The helicopter was waiting at the marina helipad. Captain Rodriguez had the yacht positioned perfectly within view of the pavilion. "This is it, Abuela," I said to her photograph on my mantelpiece. "Wish me luck." The helicopter ride over Miami was breathtaking, as always. From above, the city looked like one of my paintings, vibrant blues and greens blending with the coral and pink of the Art Deco buildings, palm trees swaying like brushstrokes across the canvas of the landscape. But my heart was pounding too hard to fully appreciate the beauty. As we approached Bayfront Park, I could see the reunion in full swing. The red and blue pavilion tent, the grills smoking, children running around, adults clustered in conversation groups. And there, anchored in clear view of the party, was my yacht, impossible to ignore, gleaming white and majestic against the blue water. The helicopter touched down on the pavilion's adjacent field, and I felt every conversation stop, every head turn toward the unexpected arrival. Through the helicopter's windows, I could see my family's faces, confusion, curiosity, and what looked like embarrassment. I stepped out, still looking like the broke artist they expected, and walked toward the pavilion with my heart hammering against my ribs. Dad was the first to reach me, his face flushed with heat and annoyance. "Mia, ¿qué carajo es esto? What's with the helicopter? Did you rent that thing? How much did that cost? You can't afford that." Mom rushed over, clutching my arm. "Mija, please tell me you didn't do something foolish. Whose helicopter is that? Are you in some kind of trouble?" Diego appeared beside them, his expression a mixture of concern and disgust. "Mia, this is embarrassing. Everyone's staring. Did you really think arriving in a helicopter would impress people? It just makes you look desperate." Carmen approached more gently, but her words carried the same sting. "Honey, I know you want attention, but this isn't the way. People are going to think you're going through some kind of crisis. The rest of the family gathered around aunts, uncles, cousins, all staring at me like I was a spectacle, a cautionary tale about what happens when dreams meet reality. Tío Miguel shook his head. Ay, Dios mío, what has this girl done now? Prima Rosa, the successful lawyer, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. I hope she hasn't gotten involved with drug money or something illegal. How else could she afford a helicopter? I stood in the center of their circle, feeling like a defendant facing judgment, but also feeling something else building inside me, not anger, but a quiet confidence I'd earned through years of struggle and ultimate success. Everyone, I said, my voice calm but carrying over the murmurs, I have something to show you. Dad waved his hand dismissively. Mia, no more showing off. Return that helicopter and whoever you borrowed money from, pay them back immediately. This family doesn't need this embarrassment. I didn't borrow money, I said simply. And I didn't rent the helicopter. I own it. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the waves lapping against the seawall 50 yards away. Then Diego laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. Own it? Mia, come on. You're a waitress who paints. Stop with the fantasies. I'm not a waitress, I said, pulling out my phone. I haven't been for 5 years. And I'd like to invite everyone to come aboard my yacht for a special announcement. I pointed toward the marina, where Elena's dream sat gleaming in the afternoon sun, its sleek lines and obvious luxury impossible to deny. Mom covered her mouth with her hands. Ay, Dios mío, that's yours too? Carmen stared at the yacht, then back at me. Mia, what's going on? What aren't you telling us? Cousin Roberto, who owned 3 restaurants and considered himself the family's biggest success story, stepped forward. That yacht's worth millions. There's no way. 35 million, I said quietly. The yacht cost 35 million. The helicopter was 12 million. But those aren't even my biggest purchases. The family stood frozen, like figures in a painting, unable to process what they were hearing. Dad's face went through a series of expressions, disbelief, confusion, and finally, a flicker of something that might have been hope. Mija, if this is true, how? How did you get this money? I took a deep breath, feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into a new life with my family, or crash into the rocks below. For the past 5 years, I've been one of the most successful contemporary artists in America. My paintings sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars each. I've had exhibitions in New York, Los Angeles, Paris. Museums collect my work. I'm worth over $30 million and I've built it all through art, the same art you told me was worthless. The silence stretched like taffy in the Miami heat. Prima Rosa, the lawyer, was the first to find her voice. The Elena Garcia Museum, that's opening next week. The newspapers have been covering it. That's you? I nodded. I built it in honor of Abuela. Her paintings are the centerpiece of the permanent collection. Mom started crying, then deep, heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and wounded. Mija, I'm so sorry. We didn't know. We thought. You thought I was a failure, I said gently. You thought art was a waste of time. Diego ran his hands through his hair, looking like his entire worldview had just crumbled. Mia, God, I'm such an idiot. I've been trying to get you job interviews while you're more successful than I'll ever be. Carmen approached me slowly, like I might disappear if she moved too quickly. Why didn't you tell us? All these years, why did you let us think? Because I needed to prove something to myself first, I said. And because I wasn't sure you'd be proud of me for succeeding at something you'd always told me was impossible. Tío Miguel, who'd been silent through the entire exchange, suddenly started laughing, not mockingly, but with genuine amazement. Coño. My niece is a millionaire artist. Elena would be so proud. The mention of Abuela's name seemed to break something open in all of us. Mom reached for me and I let her hug me, feeling her tears wet against my shoulder. Take us to the museum, she whispered. Please. Show us what you've built. The helicopter couldn't fit everyone, so we took 2 trips to transport the immediate family to the yacht. The rest of the relatives followed in cars to meet us at the marina. As we lifted off for the first trip, carrying my parents, Diego, and Carmen, I watched their faces transform as they saw Miami from above, the same view that had inspired so many of my paintings. "It's like one of your pictures," Carmen said softly, looking down at the city sprawling beneath us in blues and greens and coral pink. "That's because I painted it from up here," I replied. "This helicopter. I bought it because flying over Miami gives me ideas. Some of my best work came from seeing the city this way." When we landed on the yacht's helipad, Captain Rodriguez and my crew were waiting in crisp white uniforms. "Welcome aboard Elena's Dream," the captain announced. "Ms. Garcia, everything is prepared as you requested." My family walked across the teak deck like they were stepping into a dream. The yacht was a floating palace, 3 levels of luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows, a formal dining room that could seat 20, multiple bedrooms each bigger than my old apartment, and an art studio where I'd painted some of my most recent work. "Mia," Dad said, his voice barely a whisper, "this is incredible." I led them to the main salon, where I'd had the crew arrange a display of my work, reproductions of my most famous pieces, magazine covers featuring my art, auction catalogs showing the prices my paintings commanded. Diego picked up a copy of Art News with one of my paintings on the cover. "Jesus, Mia. This painting sold for $400,000. "That was 3 years ago," I said. "My work goes for much more now." Carmen was looking at a photograph from one of my gallery openings, me standing next to collectors and museum curators, wearing an elegant black dress, looking nothing like the struggling artist they'd imagined. "You look so confident. So successful. Why didn't we ever see this side of you?" "Because every time I came home, you reminded me that I was wasting my life," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "It was easier to let you think I was still struggling than to defend my choices over and over again." Mom sat heavily in one of the leather chairs, still crying softly. "We failed you, Mija. We were so scared. When we came from Cuba, we only knew survival. Safe jobs, steady money. We didn't understand that America gives you different opportunities." "I don't blame you," I said, and I meant it. "You wanted me to be secure. But Abuela understood something you didn't, that security isn't just about money. It's about being true to who you are." The yacht's engines had been running quietly, and now I felt us moving away from the dock. Through the windows, I could see Bayfront Park growing smaller, the family reunion continuing without us, though I suspected our cousins were all talking about nothing but our dramatic departure. "Where are we going?" Diego asked. "To the museum," I said. "The Elena Garcia Museum and Cultural Center officially opens to the public next week, but today is the private family preview." As we cruised across Biscayne Bay towards South Beach, I told them everything. How Abuela's death had inspired my breakthrough series Letters to Havana. How that exhibition had launched my career. How each subsequent series had built on the last, exploring themes of immigration, identity, family, and the Cuban-American experience. I explained how I'd used my success to give back, the scholarship programs, the community investments, the affordable housing I'd developed in Little Havana to prevent displacement of long-time residents. "You've been like a guardian angel," Carmen said, "helping people without them even knowing." "I learned that from Abuela," I replied. "She used to sneak me art supplies, slip me money, support my dreams quietly because she knew the family wouldn't approve. I wanted to honor that by helping other artists the same way." When we reached the South Beach Marina, my extended family was already waiting, cousins, aunts, uncles, all looking stunned and curious. I'd arranged for buses to transport everyone from the marina to the museum. As we walked toward the Elena Garcia Museum and Cultural Center, I felt my heart swell with pride. The renovated Art Deco building gleamed white and pink against the blue sky, its curved lines and geometric details perfectly preserved. A banner across the entrance read, "Grand Opening, the Elena Garcia Museum and Cultural Center, Preserving Cuban-American Artistic Heritage." but it was the smaller sign by the door that made my family stop and stare. Founder and primary benefactor, Mia Garcia. You built this whole thing? Tio Miguel asked, his voice full of awe. I wanted to make sure Abuela's stories would never be forgotten, I said, and that other Cuban-American artists would have a place to share their work, their history, their dreams. Inside, the museum was everything I'd envisioned and more. The main gallery featured a comprehensive exhibition of Cuban art from the 1940s through today, including several of Abuela's hidden paintings displayed with museum-quality lighting and detailed descriptions of her life and work. But the centerpiece was the recreated 1950s Havana studio, complete with vintage easels, paint-stained furniture, and Abuela's personal effects. A placard explained how Elena Garcia had been forced to abandon her artistic career when the family fled Cuba, but had continued to paint in secret, preserving memories of a lost homeland through color and brushstroke. My family walked through the galleries in stunned silence. Mom stopped in front of one of Abuela's paintings, a vibrant landscape of the Malecon at sunset, and broke down completely. I remember when she painted this, Mom whispered through her tears. We just arrived in Miami and she was so homesick. She painted it from memory because she said she never wanted to forget how beautiful Cuba was. Dad stood before a display case containing Abuela's letters, written in Spanish, describing her artistic dreams and her hope that someday her granddaughter might fulfill the ambitions she'd had to abandon. She never stopped believing in you, he said quietly. Even when we didn't understand. The tour culminated in a gallery dedicated to my own work, not just the famous pieces, but also the early paintings I'd done in Abuela's garage studio, showing the evolution from student to professional artist. The wall text explained how my grandmother's influence had shaped my artistic vision and led to my success. Diego read the artist's statement aloud. My work explores the intersection of memory and identity, the way families carry their histories across oceans and generations. Every painting is a love letter to the dreams deferred and the dreams fulfilled, to the courage it takes to leave everything behind and the strength required to build something new. He looked at me with new eyes. This isn't just success, Mia. This is important. You're preserving our history, telling our stories. Carmen was examining a painting from my Ocean Crossing series, a large canvas showing a family on a boat, their faces turned toward a distant shore, hope and fear mingled in their expressions. This could be us, she said softly. Our parents making that crossing, carrying us toward a new life. It is us, I replied. It's all of us. Every Cuban family that made that journey, that chose hope over fear. As we finished the tour, I led my family to the museum's rooftop terrace, where Miami spread out below us like a living mural. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in the warm colors I'd learned to love from Abuela's paintings. There's one more thing, I said, gesturing toward a covered easel in the corner of the terrace. I've been working on this for 3 years. I wanted to finish it before the museum opened. I pulled away the cloth, revealing a massive painting 6 feet tall and 8 feet wide, depicting 3 generations of Cuban women. In the center was Abuela as a young woman in Havana, palette in hand, painting the city around her. To her left was Mom as a young mother, holding Diego and Carmen as children, with the Miami skyline rising behind her. And to the right was me, older now, successful, standing before an easel with my own paintings surrounding me, but holding Abuela's hand across time and space. The painting was titled Elena's Legacy, and at the bottom, in small script, were the words Abuela had written on the back of my childhood portrait. Para mi nieta, who will paint the world in colors I never imagined. The family stared at the painting in absolute silence. Then Mom stepped forward and traced the air above Abuela's painted face with her finger. You captured her perfectly, she whispered. The way she looked when she was happy, when she was painting. Dad put his arm around Mom's shoulders, something I hadn't seen him do in years. Mija, this is our family. Our story. You made us beautiful. We are beautiful, I said. Even when we don't understand each other. Even when we disagree. We're a family that survived exile, that built new lives, that raised children who could dream bigger dreams than we ever imagined possible. Diego wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I owe you an apology, Mia. Not just for today, but for years. I was so focused on conventional success that I couldn't see you were building something much more important. Carmen nodded. We all owe you an apology. But more than that, we owe you our support. Our understanding. Our pride. As the sun set over Miami, painting the sky in Abuela's favorite shades of orange and pink, my family gathered around me on the museum terrace. For the first time in my life, I felt complete acceptance from them, not despite my artistic career, but because of it. So what happens now? Mom asked. With the museum, with your art, with everything? Now we move forward, I said. The museum opens to the public next week. I have a major exhibition planned for next year featuring Cuban-American artists from across the country. And I want to establish residency programs, scholarships, educational initiatives. And us? Dad asked. How do we be better family to you? I smiled, feeling a weight I'd carried for years finally lifting from my shoulders. You start by trusting that I know what I'm doing. And maybe you could help me. The museum needs board members, volunteers, people who understand our community. I'd be honored, Dad said immediately. Me too, added Diego. I could help with the financial management, make sure everything stays sustainable. Carmen nodded enthusiastically. I could coordinate health and safety programs for the community outreach initiatives. As we stood there, 3 generations of the Garcia family finally united in purpose, I felt Abuela's presence as clearly as if she were standing beside us. The woman who had carried Cuba in her heart and passed that love to me through paint and story and unwavering faith in my potential. The museum would preserve her legacy, but this moment, this healing, this understanding, this choice to support rather than criticize, would preserve our family. As we prepared to leave the museum, I made one final stop at the recreated Havana studio. There, beside Abuela's easel, I placed a fresh paintbrush, the same type she'd given me when I was 7 years old. Gracias, Abuela, I whispered. For teaching me that art isn't just what you create with your hands. It's what you create with your life. The next morning, I woke up in my penthouse to find 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word had spread through Miami's Cuban-American community about the family reunion helicopter arrival and the museum revelation. Local news stations wanted interviews. Art magazines were requesting exclusive features. Social media was buzzing with photos of the yacht and speculation about my net worth. But the message that mattered most was from Mom. Mija, your father and I want to have lunch today. We have so much to learn about your life. We're proud of you. Te amamos. For the first time in 8 years, I was excited to have a family meal. 3 months later, the Elena Garcia Museum and Cultural Center had welcomed over 50,000 visitors. Art critics were calling it a vital cultural institution and a bridge between Cuban heritage and American artistic innovation. The permanent collection had grown to include works by dozens of Cuban-American artists, and the educational programs were serving hundreds of local students. But the success I treasured most was quieter, more personal. Diego had left his Wall Street job to become the museum's chief financial officer. Carmen was leading a community health initiative that provided art therapy programs for recent immigrants. Dad had become the museum's most enthusiastic volunteer tour guide, proudly telling visitors about his daughter's achievements and his mother-in-law's artistic legacy. And Mom? Mom had started painting again, something she'd done as a teenager in Cuba but had abandoned when survival became more important than self-expression. She painted in the museum's community studio twice a week, working on a series about the women in our family. I understand now, she told me one afternoon as we painted side by side. Art isn't a luxury. It's how we remember who we are. The museum's success had opened new doors for my own work as well. The Smithsonian had acquired 3 of my paintings for their permanent collection. I was invited to exhibit at the Venice Biennale. Art collectors competed at auctions for my latest pieces, driving prices into seven figures. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Cuban government, through cultural intermediaries, had requested permission to display photographs of the museum in Havana as part of an exhibition about Cuban artistic diaspora. They wanted to show that Cuban culture had not only survived exile but had flourished, creating new forms of expression that bridged two worlds. It was validation that Abuela could never have imagined, her hidden paintings, displayed in her homeland through her granddaughter's success. As I write this, sitting in the museum's rooftop studio with Miami sparkling below me, I think about the journey that brought me here. The years of family criticism that nearly broke my spirit. The lonely nights wondering if I'd made the right choice. The moment when Abuela's death almost ended my artistic dreams. And finally, the breakthrough that changed everything. My story isn't just about artistic success or financial achievement. It's about the courage to remain true to yourself when everyone around you insists you're wrong. It's about the power of family to wound and to heal, sometimes simultaneously. It's about honoring the dreams of those who came before us while building new dreams for those who come after. Most importantly, it's about understanding that success isn't just personal. The greatest achievement isn't what you build for yourself, but what you build for others. The museum, the scholarships, the community programs, the preservation of our cultural heritage, these accomplishments matter more than any individual painting or personal milestone. When young artists visit the museum and see Abuela's recreated studio, when they learn that a Cuban exile continued painting in secret to preserve memories of home, when they understand that her granddaughter transformed hidden dreams into public celebration, I hope they take away this message: your art matters. Your culture matters. Your dreams matter. And when families visit together, parents and children, immigrants and American-born generations, I hope they learn what my family finally learned, that supporting each other's authentic selves, even when we don't understand the choices being made, is the greatest gift we can give. The little girl who picked up her grandmother's paintbrush in a Miami kitchen 21 years ago could never have imagined this life. But Abuela knew. She saw potential where others saw problems, art where others saw impracticality, success where others saw impossible dreams. Para mi nieta, who will paint the world in colors I never imagined. I painted the world, Abuela, in more colors than either of us ever dreamed possible. And in doing so, I painted a path for others to follow, a bridge between where we came from and where we're going, a canvas large enough to hold all our dreams. The sun is setting over Miami now, painting the sky in your favorite shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow I'll start a new painting, another piece in the endless mural of family, culture, memory, and hope that defines not just my art, but my life. Gracias, Abuela, for teaching me that the most important thing isn't whether others believe in your dreams. It's whether you believe in them enough to make them real. And to anyone reading this who has ever been told their dreams are impractical, their passions worthless, their authentic self unacceptable, paint anyway. Create anyway. Dream anyway. The world needs your colors too.